how you going? So today on BKRsport, we are still cracking on, baby, through this bottom 9 as we do all 17 NRL teams season review in 2024. So far, we've already done the Tigers, the Rabbitohs, the Eels, my Gold Coast Titans, and also the New Zealand Warriors. And I do mention my Gold Coast Titans, even though pretty much everybody knows that I am a Titans fan. I'm crazy, I get loud, and I'm not a massive fan of the team that we're doing today. But I am going to give you a very fair review. I'm going to give you my unbiased analysis of the team. I'll give you some positives, I'll give you some negatives, I will give you concerns, and I will give you some, possibilities of being able to bounce back in 2025. And obviously today, guys, we are doing the Brisbane Broncos. But like I said, we will be going through the 2023 signings and losses going into 2024. Same thing with this year from 2024 into 2025. And talking through the ladder, talking through how the season played out, giving you the biggest key parts of the year from my perspective, and then also talking about, their contract situation and development list and all that kind of jazz, right? So if you are here and you do have a different opinion of mine, please feel free, jump into the comment section, let me know what your thoughts are, because at the end of the day, this is my perspective. At the end of the day, this is my opinion, and I am going to give you as unbiased a review as I possibly can, because I do want it to be fair for all the different teams, right? Because don't worry, I had to do the same thing for my own team as well. So I appreciate you guys, and looking forward to hearing the open conversation in the comment section. But all right, let's get into the Brisbane Broncos. Welcome, my friends and my family from up there in Brisbane. Oh, what a year. What a year to really talk about here. Obviously, in 2023 was a miraculous year. Actually, let's quickly go back here and just show you the improvement that they made from 2020, right? So in 2020, the Broncos, they did finish in last position. Now, this is only a 20-round season, mind you. So, the same thing for me in regards to my team. Ooh, right, okay, don't worry about it. My team right there is that I complained that we probably would have made the 8 if the season was a normal length. And I use that example here for the Broncos and say, I don't believe the Broncos get the spoon this year if it wasn't for the fact that it was a shortened year due to COVID, right? So that is a positive in regards to that, but obviously that's a long time ago, right? I'm just using this as an example going forward of the slight improvement year by year by year until you get to this year, yeah? So 2020, you did come last, your first ever spoon. In 2021, let's get up to the final round of the season, which was round 25, and you came third last, right? So above the Cowboys here. But that's another team that improved over the next couple of years. But the Broncos, obviously, they finished in 14th position with 7 wins and 17 losses, which is 4 more wins than the previous year. Right, so a slight improvement, not an incredible improvement, but a slight improvement at that. We then go to 2022, where the Broncos, we all know about it, they were in the top 4 for the majority of the season, and then fell off to 9th in the last 4 weeks, which was just a crazy dramatic turnaround, right? Very much not an impressive year, but to go back to the previous year, they were here in 14th position, right? So that is a 5 win improvement, or 5 ladder positioning improvement. And they had 7 wins, they now have 13 wins. So you're seeing that slight progress, despite the fact that they were memed and joked about and laughed at all throughout that year. They did slightly improve, well, not slightly, they had nearly double their wins and still came 9th, right? So it was slowly progressing, which was good. Then you obviously get to 2023. Right, now 2023 is when the Dolphins come into the competition. I'm going to click that to get to round 27, and they come second place. Right, so they've gone from 3 wins to 7 wins to 13 wins to 18 wins. So that is really impressive, because you're not just going bang bang like a lot of people talk about, right? You are actually improving on a consistent level by going from 3 to 7 to 13 to 18. Right, so you are on the right trajectory. Obviously, this year they make the grand final. They're up by 16 points with 15 minutes to go. And yes, they did obviously lose to the team above them at the Panthers, with Nathan Cleary being one of the greatest players of all time. Right, so this Broncos team has been progressing. Then we get to 2024, and this happens. They then go back to a similar level of 10 wins, which was 2 years ago, still improved by 3 wins over that team from 3 years ago. Or 2 years ago, sorry. But with that being said, have dropped off 8 wins in comparison to last year. 8 wins. Because again, 18 wins there, equal first, mind you, just the points differential wasn't as good. From 18, they go down to 10. So there is that improvement from the spoon, and then bang, down. That's a concern. It's a concern because you were on the right track. It's a concern because you were doing the right things to put the Broncos back into the level that we know the Brisbane Broncos can be. Obviously, I actually grew up in Brisbane until I was 12 years old, before the Titans came into the competition. And then I moved with my family to the Gold Coast, and that was the same year the Titans actually came into the competition, right? So it was a no-brainer, especially when I was such a young age. So I grew up in that dominant era of the Broncos in the 2000s and the late 1990s, right? I was very young, but like that's what I was used to as a young lad, especially in Brisbane. And the Broncos were known as a team that you could never count out no matter what. Obviously, nowadays, that's not the case. And I feel like because of that dominance, they are memed and are pointed at and laughed at as heavily as they are based upon that previous time where the Broncos fans were able to really knuckle down and get into you about how good they are compared to you. And now the other teams are like, well, guess what? We're coming for you because don't worry, the Panthers will get this. One day, when the Panthers aren't as successful, the Panthers will have all the ramifications for all the shit they talk. And it's like, right now, it's great. You can talk all your shit all you want. It's brilliant. You're allowed to do it. You can do whatever you want, actually, because you won 3 premierships in a row, Panthers. But just know you will not be successful forever. Ask the Broncos this. Ask, a few teams this. Even the Rabbitohs, for example. And your ramifications will come for you, right? Because the Broncos are experiencing it now where everyone just goes hard at them. So I think in regards to that ladder positioning over the years, it was an improvement. And then obviously this year really is a massive concern because it's such a significant drop-off from the constant progression, right? Now we go and have a look here at the attack. 537 points scored this year is, I think, second best in the bottom 9. No, third best in the bottom 9, behind the Eels on 561 and behind the Dolphins on 577. Yeah, that's better than most. It's actually still better than the Bulldogs, who came 6th, and the Knights, who came 8th on 470. So that means, and again, I say this throughout all these season reviews so far, defense wins premierships, guys. Because you can have an attack that's worthy of a top 8 team. That's congratulations. Cool, no one cares. Because at the end of the day, it's this that matters. It's the defense, right? And that's not horrific compared to the Tigers, the Eels, the Rabbitohs. You can argue the Titans, but it's not too far off it, obviously. The Dragons, who have been just such a weird team. We'll get to them on the next video. And the Raiders and whatnot. But as you can see here, every team besides the Dolphins and the Warriors were in the 600s at minimum. And if you look at the top 8, you see some 400s, a 300, which is crazy. And then all just early 500s, except for the Cowboys, who we all know about their defensive woes, but they make up for it here. But this is why no one really believes in them, right? But the point matter is that's the highest. 568 is the highest in the top 8, and they've been hounded for their defense this year. Whilst the Broncos, 607. So that is the issue there. Their points differential is minus 70, which is close enough to the Warriors. You can think about that now. I know they've got the draw, but you can think about that now just to comparison. You've also got the Dolphins, who are obviously a little bit better, but they beat out the Raiders, they beat out the Dragons, the Titans, the Eels, the Rabbitohs, and the Tigers. But like with the bottom 4 here, you should be expectant of beating out these 4 teams in regards to your points differential, right? So that's fine. This is also fine because it's only, they're 1 spot off and they're 8 points above you, whatever, yeah? But then, yeah, you've got this team and you've got this team that obviously were significantly worse than you points differential-wise. You finish below them, which obviously comes down to the 10 wins that you do have. So when you look at this season from a ladder position of 10 wins and 14 losses, it does come down more than likely to a few individual games that you just didn't get it going in, right? And that may sound obvious, yeah? But with that being said, it's obvious for a reason. Because the Broncos this year are probably going to try and complain and blame, Reece Walsh being out or Adam Reynolds being out, which is the key one that I'll talk about soon, or Payne Haas being out of points. But I refer back to our previous season review in the Warriors, where they went and beat the Panthers with their depth and their development list, right? Magic round. Whilst the Broncos didn't do that. They didn't win the games if those players were out. So you need to have your next man up mentality, especially when you're such a big, sizable club like the Brisbane Broncos. You need to be having the depth, right? You have lost guys like Reece Walsh who went away, then came back. Sam Walker obviously went away. You've had, I think Tommy Dearden was Broncos as well. You know, the point of the matter is that the Broncos, for mine, don't have the depth to get them through the games with the injuries, which is what we see from obviously a lot of the teams that are usually down the bottom of the table. Again, sounds obvious, but the Broncos, as we'll probably go through in regards to their wins and losses in a second, they just don't have the depth to be able to capitalise on the moments that they need to capitalise on. Because every team's going to be impacted by Origin for the most part. You know, the only teams you're really not going to see impacted is like the Tigers. But even the Rabbitohs in second last get a few players into the Origin. The Titans obviously, you know, usually have like Tino and Moeaki Fotuaika and David Feeder and the likes, right? Sometimes AJ Brimdog, millionaire AJ Brimson. Potentially Loffy in the future. You never know, right? So even teams in the bottom four will have Origin impacted players. And also, a lot of these teams, especially the Rabbitohs, the Eels, and the Titans, were decimated by injuries this year. Decimated. Right, and that, yes, okay, they finished 4 points above the Titans, 6 points above the Eels and the Rabbitohs. But for me, it is also still not good enough. It's better, for sure, don't get me wrong. With that being said, one of these teams did beat them twice this year, right? This team, they had to really come back from like 24-0 down against. We'll look and see the Rabbitohs. I don't think the Tigers beat them. But the point of the matter is that there is a lot of concerns about the Broncos regarding their progression drop, but also in regards to the depth going forward. And we'll look at their development list in a little bit, right? Just to see what we're seeing in the future, plus also their contract situation. But let's get into their draw. I was going to kind of make one last point about this, but okay, the last point that I'll make is that yes, okay, you're 26, you're 4 points off the top 8 there, right? And if you had have won those two extra games, I'm sure that 30-point differential would have been switcherooed. Obviously, it did also come down to the second last game of the season against the Dolphins, where whoever won was still in the fight for the 8. The Broncos were going to play the Storm in the last round of the season. The Dolphins obviously played the Knights, and they lost, and the Knights got into the top 8. But the point of the matter is that despite all the concerns that I've made here, the Broncos still had a chance up until the second last game of the season. They still had a chance. I still believe that effectively their season was really slapped down hard with this one. But we'll get into that. But the point of the matter is that, you know what I've actually realised this year? Is that despite the fact the Titans were poor for the majority of the year, they still actually kind of hounded these two teams. These two teams. Because they beat the Warriors twice, one of which being 66-6, and also the 27-24 in New Zealand. And then they beat the Broncos twice, 36-34 in Suncorp and 46-18 at Seabus. These two teams, the 2 points that they would have gotten from at least one of those games, would have been gigantic. But if they had have done what they were favourites to do and did their job against a team like this, the Broncos would have been in the 8 because they wouldn't have got slapped at Seabus that would have hurt them in regards to that factor. But they would have also just, even with one of them, would have been still in the hunt even without that Dolphins game or all that sort of stuff, right? So it is quite funny. It is quite funny. People won't really look at that. I hate saying that too, but and that's the last 5 games of the season. But with that being said, these were also really, really close in at a time with this team, right? So, man, I think that a lot of the reason why they've missed the 8 here and why they've just been out of it is because of games like that, but also Broncos because of games like the Eels won. But they still won that game, see? They still won that game, got the 2 points. So that's the last point that I'll make here, is that they were just off the mark. That's for sure. They were just off the mark. But I would say that there's less positives about this season than there is about the Warriors season. And I'm taking the two in comparison here because obviously, one, we did our season review of the Warriors just before, yesterday, but also the Broncos had, well, both these teams have had a big drop-off from the previous year. So they are very similar years. They are very, very similar years. And it's not just the one, you know, if the Warriors had won that game against Manly, it would have been the exact same year because obviously they had this one draw. So it's interesting that you can actually compare the two between the Broncos and Warriors very, very similarly. And both these teams were the teams that play each other in the prelim. Yeah, the more you think about it, they are exactly the same this year. All right, so the Broncos in 2024, they started off the season in Vegas and lost to the Roosters 2010. I don't think you look at that. I segregate the Vegas games on an individual basis with themselves. Manly, Rabbitohs, Roosters, Broncos, doesn't matter. You just separate those. They have nothing to do with the season, realistically. It's a good match to win, but it's like, it doesn't compile with the rest. So they lost that game, but then they started the season well at home by winning 28-18 over the Rabbitohs. They lost 34-12 to the Panthers, which doesn't surprise considering they came second, 3 premierships in a row. Then they went and absolutely flogged the Cowboys and competed well here with the Melbourne Storm, right? Then go and beat the Dolphins. Then go and beat the Raiders. Then go and beat the Tigers. So their first 8 rounds is actually pretty good. Actually, after 8 rounds, where were they? After 8 rounds of this season, the Broncos were in 5th position. 5 wins and 3 losses, right? 5 wins and 3 losses from their first 8 games. So they started off this season really, really well. I'm going to leave it like that because I want to come back to that as the season progresses. So yes, ignore this, ignore that. Then you start going into a win against the Rabbitohs. In hindsight, not great. Going into the season, good win. Even though we also knew at that time the Rabbitohs had quite a few injuries, Campbell Graham and whatnot. I don't even know if Trell played. Actually, did Trelly Boy play? Yes, he did play. Okay, so look, it's not a bad win. Don't get me wrong. Always a great. But there were, I remember going into that game and there was a lot of injuries for the Rabbitohs there. This one's obviously not great, but it's also the Panthers. You can kind of understand that. And then, yeah, you go into a huge streak here where they were really competitive against their big rivals, the Cowboys, who obviously made the 8 this year. The Storm obviously came first, but this team just wins these games. This team, every time we go through the season review with a team, this team just wins the games. Even if they don't look that great, if they're not that great, they still win. They still find a way to win. They know how to win. They remember how to win. So even when teams come close, they still win the game. So that is a huge point there. But you're happy with the Broncos competing with them. That's for sure. Right? And then you go and beat the Dolphins. You hadn't lost them at any stage of your history at that point. You go and beat the Raiders, who you're expected to beat. And then you go and flog the Tigers, who you are also expected to beat. So that is a really good period there. It's a really good period where you are in 5th position and you're only 1 win, actually. Because you've got the bye. You haven't had a bye. You're only 1 win off the top of the table on the Sharks and the Storm. Because the bye gets you there. Your points differential is 64, which is the second best, it's the 3rd best points differential in the comp. Obviously, you got the Roosters in 2nd, and you got the Sharks on 99 in 1st. So you're not far off at this point. And then you get flogged by the Roosters. And that is an issue. That's a big issue there. But then you go and win a couple of games. That's great. You go and beat Manly, magic round, 13-12. You didn't look great in that game, but you still won. And you go and, flog the Eels, which is to be expected considering they're in a spoon bowl battle. This game impacts it, but you got 2 wins out of 3 in this period after this Tigers. No, sorry. So you've gone, besides this 1 loss here to the Roosters, 1 win, 2 win, 3 win, 3-1, 4-1, 5-1 with Manly. You've gone 5-1. So your first 11 rounds this season were actually pretty solid. And I don't think anybody can disagree with that. Because then, you have a look here, round 11. You are still in 5th position, actually, crazily enough. So these teams are still just winning. And even though you beat the Dolphins, you're still there. But you're now, again, still, without a bye, above the Dolphins and above the Panthers. Equal with the Storm. Your points differential is not as good as the Storm. And then only the 1 win short of the Sharks. But their points differential is much better. So your season hasn't collapsed yet. This is where your season collapses. This is where it happens. How does this happen? Because I'm going to click on this game here, lads. And I'm going to tell you who's out. So you got your Reece Walsh. Obviously, you've got your No Reno. You've got Payne Haas, You've got pretty much your team. Besides, obviously, Adam Reynolds. Keanu Key at this point wasn't the Keanu Key that we know. Or he wasn't. We didn't know him to be how good. I did, but everyone else didn't know how good he was. AJ Brimson would normally be the fullback, but he was injured at the time. You had to put Bo Furman into the centres because you got your Phil Sarmies injured. You've got your, at this time, you had, also Tony Francis on debut, mind you. Your Phil Sarmies, you had your Jojo Fafitas injured, all the likes, right? Look at the halves. Look at the halves. Chris Randall and Tom Weaver. Tom Weaver, a rookie, and Chris Randall, a hooker that has been playing more so as a lock this year. Kieran Foran's injured. Tanner Boyd's injured. And also, Kieran Foran and Tanner Boyd are injured. Let's put it that way. I might be forgetting someone as well. Sam Verrill's obviously in the 9. Obviously, no Tino. We know that. No Tino. But guess what? Jamie Jolliffe is also injured for the Titans. And like I said, both of them had to go to the back row. Isaac Lee was on the bench. I think I remember there was 9 or 10 players out here for the Titans in this game. There was 9 or 10 players out for the Titans in this game, and they won. And then there was another injury to Tony Francis mid-game. So, again, you go back to this, and you say, what is this? Especially at home, on Indigenous round. How do you lose this game? And that sets up the next 2.5 months. Because after that really strong start at round 11, let's have a look at this. So again, round 11, they are in 5th position. 1 loss, bye. 2 loss, 3 loss, bye. 4 loss, 5 loss, 6 loss in a row. That's 2.5 months inclusive of the buys. That's 2.5 months without getting a win since that Manly game at Magic Round. So we go all the way down here to the game against the Knights in round 20. So you go from 5th to 11th. And that's because of those 2 buys and also the strong start. So you're on 20 points there. You're still within range. You've still got another buy. The Cowboys, however, do have a buy over here. And also the Dolphins and also the Bulldogs are on 9 wins. You're on 8 wins. You're only 1 win still behind. You're still only 1 win behind. Right? So that is a big drop off from 5th to 11th. Not as much as you would think. But it is a significant enough of a drop off there. So that period is just woeful. I won't even bother going into the games, right? Then you go and beat the Knights. People start to get a bit hyped up again. They're like, okay, we're going to make a last minute run here at the finals. And it's going to be exciting stuff. We're going to punch on. We're going to fly home here. Bang, bang. Look who one of these teams are. And then the Bulldogs, who have one of the worst attacks in the comp this year, despite being as good as they are defensively, flog ya and flog ya. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Because let's go here to round 27. Titans scored 488 points this year. The Bulldogs scored only 529 points this year. So 488 is the 4th worst. Actually, I worked this out the other day. 4th worst attack in the comp, and also they had the 4th worst defense in the comp. And again, you go have a look at this. The Broncos actually led this game like 18-4 or 18. They led 18-10 or something at halftime. And they had like 36 unanswered points conceded by a team that had significantly struggled in this season. Significantly struggled in this season. And this team had 41 points put past them by, a team who came 6th, but also 529. It's like the 5th or 6th worst attack in the comp. The only teams that were worse than attack-wise, Tigers, Rabbitohs, Titans, Warriors, just Dragons, Raiders, and Knights. So like 7th, they were probably about like 12th or 11th or something like that in regards to their attack with Bulldogs. That's not great. But yeah, you had an absolute walloping put past you by both those teams. That is what ended your season. Because after that early start of the season, and even though you had that 2.5 months, you had plenty of time to beat. Maybe this team is not expecting to beat with their defense. Still scored 16 points in a poor game. If you played well, you probably would have scored more than that. But like this just ends your season. It just ends your season. Because you are expectant of winning that game against the bottom 14 and not going 3 straight losses in a row against them going back to 2023. You go and flog the Cowboys, you get a bit of hope here, you get a bye, you flog the Eels expectant, and then the big game that you needed to win was that. And this is the concerning one as well, right? Because like this is the be all and end all. You're not at home, but you're at home. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're playing against the Dolphins at Suncorp Stadium. This is your home ground. You've never lost to the Dolphins before. You win this game. You have a chance to win if you... Well, you had to make the 8 by beating the Storm, which that obviously clearly didn't happen. But that's all in hindsight. You have everything to play for here and you get absolutely flogged. And it goes back to these 2 games. You have everything to play for and you get flogged. So the Broncos this year just did not have the tenacity and they did not have the belief that they do have it in the moment they need it. Because these 3 games are the epitome of what the Broncos were this year. When they needed to have it, they didn't have it. But they do have it. We saw it in 2023. But when they needed to have it, they didn't have it. And then obviously this game, it doesn't mean anything, man. Don't take this one too harshly, Broncos fans. I know it sucked to finish off the season like this, and you don't want to ever concede 50 in your last game of the season. But don't hold on to this too much. This ruined that game. And it's like, I think realistically the Broncos knew that when the Storm rested all their players against the Cowboys week prior, they won't win that game. So the snapshot of this year, in the draw, you did well in the first part. You struggled for 2.5 months after, getting beaten at home by a team that you should never have been beaten by and conceded 36 points in that one too. Then also, you come back down here, you start to kind of piece together a win with the Knights, and then you get slapped by the Dogs, slapped by the Titans. You go past a couple of wins here. This one wasn't actually that impressive because you were down like 24-0 or something like that. You came back cool. It's against a wooden spoon nilly team in the Parramatta Eels, and then you get slapped here and slapped here. Your back end of the year really let you down, especially in regards to these two games. So that's what I would say there. You weren't as bad as you think when it comes to the first half of the year, but gee whiz, you fell off. Gee whiz, you fell off. You still absolutely could have been a top 8 team and still absolutely could have been competitive had you won just 2 games in the back end of the season against teams like the Titans and who was another team? Who's another team you should have beat? Like, I'm not saying you should have beaten that team. Titans, you'd argue you could have and should have. You would finish above them. You finish above them. And like I said, you finish above them. Again, it comes down at times. It does. It comes down at times. People won't like hearing that because obviously we're a rival team, but I've laid it out for you. I've showed you what I'm talking about. All right. Well, I'm going to have a swig of coffee. And we're going to get into the signings and the contracts. This one might be going for a little bit longer because this is obviously quite an in-depth team. So the Brisbane Broncos, from what I'm looking at here, it looks like most of what they have to do is think about is next year. There's not any club or player options here. Like we said with the Eels, there was a couple of ones with the Warriors and whatnot. Kind of just the one with the Titans with Tino. But there's not much club options and player options in this. Actually, there is not a single one that we're aware of, right? So, you look at this, and most of these are 2025 except for a couple of outliers. Reno next year. That's a big conversation and a big discussion. We'll probably do another video about Reno and whatnot in the off-season. Betakura, Young, Billy Walters, still got a couple more years. This completely depends on Kevy Walters, to be completely honest with you. I'm not going to get into it. Let's look at 25. So Blake Moser, Corey Jensen, Corey Pakes, Fletcher Baker, Jack Kasevsky, Jaden Hunt, Hetherington Staggs, Reece Walsh, Selwyn Cobbo, Tyson Smoothie, and Xavier Willison. This is a big one. I think that Reece Walsh right now is freaking out because he probably should have signed the contract when the contract was on the table, and now it hasn't been great with him with injury and also just with form. So this one's a worrying one here for Reece, but he will stay. He will stay. He's a Bronco through and through. You just know it. And then the other one here that was a big one was, where's Tony Staggs? Where is he? There he is, 2025. Those are the two really, really significant ones in regards to 2025, which is obviously next year, which means they can speak from November 1st of this year to another team. I would not be surprised if Staggs does. I wouldn't be surprised if Staggs looked at like a Roosters or somebody like that, but I don't think that Reece Walsh will be going anywhere. But for the most part, the other 2025s are all depth plays, a bit how you go and seeing what's going on, and this is a conversation in itself, right, with Adam Reynolds. Corey Jensen's probably one that they really should be, locking down as well because he's been really underrated. But then you look at the 2026s and yeah, you've got plenty of time. Ezra Mam's obviously signed long-term. Dean Mariner's got quite a few years. Brendan Piakura's got quite a few years. Needs to improve himself though, I'm not going to lie. Jordan Ricky. Geez, he needs to improve his form, but he's signed in long-term 4 years. Or 3 years from next year. Not convinced. Long enough to wait. Paddy Carrigan, that's a big one. You wanted that for 2028. You wanted that for a long-term one. This is looming. Payne Haas is looming. It's not now, though. You don't have to think about it now, but Payne Haas is looming. Because if this Broncos team decides to get rid of Reno, and we do see the Broncos go into a bit of a rebuild stage and a development stage, then Payne Haas will leave. But Payne will leave and go to a team that can win a comp, because he obviously wants to win a comp. I saw him after the grand final last year, underneath and out by the sheds and whatnot. I'm telling you, he wants to win a comp. So this is looming. It's not something you have to think about right this very second. We've already had contract issues with Payne Haas before, but you've got time. Yeah, you've got time to think about this with Payne. So don't stress too much. but it just comes down to how the direction goes from next year onwards. So overall, looking at the snapshot, a couple of big ones that you do have to think about in regards to Staggs and Reece Walsh now. Payne Haas a little bit later, Patrick Carrigan, as remember, your big time players who are still quite young do have plenty of years that you don't have to think about. But Renault will be the direction change. Adam Reynolds, the decision on him will be the direction change that we see where the Broncos are going for the next 3 to 4 years. Right? Because if he signs for 2 extra years or 1 extra year to 2026, that's still 3-4 years because it will take time to then adjust and change from that point. Yeah? So, interesting situation here with the Broncos. It's really difficult to kind of get a gauge there. Development list here. Kobe Black, Bailey True, Israel Leota, and Josh Rogers. Josh Rogers will stay. They need him right now. Kobe Black will stay because obviously he's very, very young. And Bailey True, not too sure about. Israel Leota, heard of him. Haven't really seen anything. He's got high raps. He's in the same book as like the Zane Harrison and whatnot. And Mitchell Wood from the Bulldogs. Zane Harrison, Titans. Mitchell Wood from the Bulldogs. Kobe Black, be interesting to see how it goes. Small development list here. Prospect, not sure. And has had a few games, is okay. So, it's an okay development list. It's an okay. It's nothing expansive, however. Nothing expansive. Alright, well, let's have a look here at the games, because at the losses... Oh, there you go. There is. Sorry, there's just a big ad there. Hi, Hisense. There you go. You get a free advertisement here on the channel. 2024 games. Fletcher Baker... This is coming into 2024, by the way. Fletcher Baker from the Roosters, Jaden Hunt from the Dragons, Josiah Katapani from the Rabbitohs, and Jack Kasevsky from the Cowboys. It's a bit of whatever. You know, it's a bit of whatever coming into the year. Okay, cool. You know, we saw part of Fletcher Baker. It didn't really work out. We've seen Jaden Hunt. It hasn't necessarily been crazy. Josiah Katapani has been ripped to shreds by the fans for defensive abilities. But with that being said, I don't disagree with this signing at the time. I think that he is still a young prospect, man. But it hasn't been the greatest of years there for Josiah. And then Jack Kasevsky for the Cowboys. It's a very much of a muchness. It's a bit of a whatever. You know, it's not that I don't like it, but it's just like it's not going to improve or, you know, decrease your team, right? You know, it's not going to be adjusting your table positioning too crazily there. But in regards to 2024 losses, now this is the key area here. This is the key one. Yes. So, Herbie Farnworth to the Dolphins, Keenan Palacia to the Titans, Tom Flegler to the Dolphins, Logan Bayless-Bro unsigned, Kurt Capewater to the Warriors, and Jordan Pereira into retirement. Jordan Pereira one doesn't really matter too much. The Bayless-Bro one doesn't matter too much. But those three, and this one is huge. Kurt Capewater to the Warriors, he suited the Broncos way more for sure, the way that they were designed. With that being said, this keeps annoying me. This was an important player for the Broncos in the way that they were playing last year. But it's not just about this. It's the size of the 4 players. Tom Flegler was an amazing front rower there, where it was an Origin front row, and he went to the Dolphins. Kurt Capewell was an Origin player, and they let him go to the Warriors. Keenan Palacia ran for the same amount of meters in that grand final. And granted, Keenan Palacia hasn't been great with the Titans this year, but with that being said, ran for the same amount of meters as Payne Haas in that grand final last year. And he was gone. And then Herbie Farnworth, obviously one of the better centers in the game, goes to the Dolphins as well. So they give 2 of their best players to their crosstown rivals. And then also give another one of their really good players. That hasn't necessarily worked out, but he was one of the better players last year to their rivals from an hour down south. And it's across the 2 different countries. I don't understand their losses. I don't understand why they allowed 4 significant players a part of the team. Starter, bench, starter. They lost 3 starters and a bench player and an important integral bench player. I don't know who gave the go-ahead for those 4. At one of them, sure. 2 of them, sure. But you can't let go so many players from the team that made the grand final. I know this one was early on, and I know that they let go of these players before the grand final. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, like, 4 players from your starter/bench, from your 17 to go, with them being the size of Farnworth and Flegler, I don't know about that. I always disagree with that. I said this before the season started too. And then, in regards to 2025, I don't think they've made a signing. It doesn't have any signings here. If they have, please comment below, but there hasn't been a signing yet. But they've just lost Tristan Sailors to St. Helens, which is okay. You know, he was a solid enough backup to Reece Walsh, but he wants to start. And he's not going to get it at too many NRL clubs because there's so many clubs that already have a billion fullbacks, yeah? But has off to St. Helens, so I don't mind that. I don't think it's a bad one there. So, overall, if they haven't signed anybody, that's a bit disappointing. But then again, a lot of teams haven't necessarily signed a great deal for next year. Maybe we're about to just see a real influx over the next couple of weeks in this final series. Obviously, I know that Regan Campbell-Gillard is available. I think the Broncos will probably try hard for him so they can at least get somebody. Yeah. This Broncos, the 2025 losses and gains are disappointing because they've not signed anyone yet. And in regards to 2024 losses, it speaks for itself. 2024 gains didn't make up for that. So, what, did they think this was going to make up for the losses that they had? Did they really think that that was going to make up for the losses? Surely not. Surely not, man. So, this one's been going for quite some time again because it's an interesting team. A big drop-off and whatnot. The Broncos need to define their direction now with Reno. And if they're going to go for another couple of years with him after his contract ends next year, they need to find it now. So they can start piecing together their team. They just need to get back to being who the Broncos are. Right? They need to change their direction from whatever this thirst trap team it is right now. And it is a thirst trap team online. They're focusing on individual players like your Reece Walsh, like your Ezra Mann, right? Adam Reynolds doesn't get the same kind of, like the true fans know Reno, right? And that's a huge part of their team. But they're delivering a thirst trap kind of team rather than a hard-working, powerful, strong Petro Simonasiva, Gordy Tallis, Tony Carroll, who's some other, Shane Webke, dearie me, Carl Webb back in the day. May he rest in peace. Paddy Carrigan's the only one that has that same formula, in my personal opinion. You can even argue Payne Haas, absolutely. Actually, no, I'm not going to even say you can even argue. He is a part of that formula. I would say that Reno is a part of that formula. But it just comes down to age there. They need to get back to being the Broncos from before, where they are focused on being that team that everybody loves to hate because they're so good, because that's what they're delivering on the field, and because they're focused on the field. They're focused on winning. They're focused on being the successful team of Queensland. They're focused on dominating the competition, not focused on modelling contracts. And that's my personal opinion. If you have a different opinion, comment below. But the Broncos are too busy being the spotlight of the media for all the wrong reasons, rather than being the spotlight of the media for, even if they lose a game and lose it by just, and be a high-profile market team. They're too busy thinking about how to protect their own egos rather than protecting the fan base, the community, the city, and the team itself. It's about the individual egos right now. That's my issue with them. And I think that that's a clear reason as to why they've dropped off as much as they have. These two teams are in similar positions. The Broncos and the Warriors here are in very similar positions from last year to this year. But with that being said, this is a whole different reason in itself to this reason. Right? But they're very similar positions and drop-offs and whatnot. But there's a whole different answer for the Warriors to the Broncos. I just feel like the Broncos are too busy trying to inflate their own egos than actually doing what we know they can do. They've got a good damn well team. They do. They've got a good damn well team, the Brisbane Broncos. Go onto their team list. They would normally have Reece Walsh. I know Corey Oates is off, but, Selwyn Cobbo, great player. Staggs would normally be in the centres. Fantastic player. Jesse Arthur's a solid player. Adam Reynolds is great. Ezra Mann, normally there in the 5'8". Corey Jensen's really come on this year, which is great to see. Payne Haas obviously would be there. Well, that's just zoomed in. I didn't want that. Anyway, we're not going to continue going through that because I need to fix that. But anyway, the point of the matter was, and maybe that's the reason why, Billy Wells I personally don't believe is their hooker. But also, that's another thing in regards to ego. I don't think that Kevin Walters will drop his son because he doesn't want to drop his son. But I do also think that you've seen, not Smoothie, Blake Moser really come onto the scene and really do a significant amount for this team when he comes on. Whilst last year, Billy Walters was underrated and did what he needed to do. Wasn't the greatest, but was very underrated. This year, completely dropped off, but Kevin won't drop his son. There is so many things that are political here. I think there is a lot of politics happening in the Broncos right now. And I think that's the issue of why they're losing to teams that they shouldn't. That's the issue of why they're not winning the games that they should. And I think that's the biggest issue in regards to not being the team that we all know they are. there is some promise and potential when they have a full team of Reece Walsh, Ezra Mann, Payne Haas, Adam Reynolds, you know, even if you want to add in Billy Walters in that 9 just to complete the spine, but I still think Blake Moser, Staggs, Selwyn Cobbo, Jordan Ricky on his day is great, Paddy Carrigan, unbelievable workhorse. They have the team there still, but where's your direction going? Because your team relies around Adam Reynolds. And once Reynolds goes, what do you do? What do you do? Because Kobe Black's not ready yet. He's still quite young. You've also got Jock Madden, who isn't the guy. We know this is the truth, right? We know it's the truth. You have promising product in regards to who you have now. Your development list and whatnot is still a few years away, especially with Kobe Black. You don't want to ruin him and whatnot. So the point of the matter is that if you can get back to it, you just have to really adjust the way that your team is being marketed and the ego that is being built throughout the individual players that are separating the individual players from the hard workers when you want that collective hard-working team. That's my biggest thing with the Brisbane Broncos right now. And if you sort that out, you will be back to be competing for the premiership again because you do have the team there. But that's going to be what I say here about this team. I hope you guys have enjoyed. That is my pure, as best as I can, unbiased opinion here that I can give you from my perspective to your perspective. Please, if you agree, disagree, comment it below. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Slightly agree, slightly disagree. Please let me know where I'm wrong, where I'm right, in your opinion, because you're not necessarily right, and I'm not necessarily right. It's just how we both see it, yeah? So I appreciate you guys as always. Obviously, hit that like button and subscribe. Like I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed. We are doing all 17 teams. The next one will be the St. George Illawarra Dragons, who had a very interesting year for sure. But I appreciate you as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Alrighty, guys, thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya.